If the church, as you say, has such a glorious understanding of sex and married love, why then does the church promote celibacy? I'm Dr. Christopher West, the Theology of the Body guy, and in this video, we'll take a look. We're continuing our series looking at questions from my book, Good News About Sex and Marriage. We are now in the final chapter, and we are looking at questions of celibacy for the kingdom. And we're beginning, as we said, with this question. If the church has such a positive vision of sex and married love, why does she promote celibacy? If you're following along, we're on page 186. If you'd like to follow along, check out the link below to get your own copy of this book. Here's what I say. At first glance, it seems as if the church's promotion of celibacy is a contradiction of everything we've been saying in all these other videos about this glorious, stupendous, wonderful vision of our creation as male and female and the call of the two to become one flesh. But upon further investigation, we discover that the celibate vocation, properly understood, is actually the ultimate fulfillment of the church's positive vision of sexuality. What? Sounds like a contradiction, doesn't it? But check this out. As a sacrament, the union of man and woman in one flesh is only a sign and a foreshadowing of things to come. You may remember from previous videos, as I've explained, that the Bible begins with the marriage of man and woman, right, in the book of Genesis, but it ends in the book of Revelation with the marriage of Christ and the church. The whole purpose of the union of man and woman that starts the Bible is to give us a sign and a foreshadowing of our ultimate destiny, union with God forever in what the Bible calls the marriage of the Lamb. Remember that Jesus says in the resurrection, we're no longer given in marriage. Why? People will respond, wait a minute, are you saying we get to heaven and God just pushes the delete button on sex and marriage? No. God pushes the complete button, right? It's like this. Jesus is saying there's no longer marriage in the resurrection. He's saying you no longer need a sign to point you to Disneyland when you've arrived at Disneyland, right? The ultimate reality has come. Celibacy for the kingdom is a choice to skip the first bookend of the Bible, the sacrament, the sign, the foreshadowing, to devote all of one's energies, indeed all of one's eros, E-R-O-S, the Greek word for that longing for love and union, right? Celibacy for the kingdom is a devotion of our entire energy and eros and longing for love and union to the ultimate marriage, the marriage that alone can satisfy. You might say that celibacy for the kingdom leapfrogs over the sign to devote itself to the ultimate reality. And here, I would argue that celibacy for the kingdom is not the best way to describe this vocation. It's a negative term. It tells us what those people are not doing. Well, that would be like defining marriage as the non-bachelor vocation. Why put it in the negative? If we put celibacy for the kingdom in the positive, celibacy for the kingdom is the marriage of the Lamb lived out here and now. In other words, celibacy for the kingdom is a proclamation, a declaration that heaven is real and heaven is the ultimate fulfillment of our yearning for love and union. It is a declaration not only that heaven is real, but it is worth selling everything to possess. In the book I say, there, in the heavenly marriage, Christ will make a gift of himself to humanity in a beatifying experience. What does that mean? Beatifying. Completely, blissfully, ecstatically happy. Fulfilled beyond our wildest imaginings. Christ will make a gift of himself to humanity in a beatifying experience completely beyond anything proper to earthly life. Our reciprocal gift of ourselves to Christ will be our response to the gift of him to us. This will be the marriage of divinity and humanity, and it will be eternally consummated forever. This is our heavenly destiny. God's eternal plan is to marry us. That's what heaven is. And God wanted that eternal marital plan to be foreshadowed by creating us male and female and calling the two to become one flesh. When the heaven reality comes, the sign gives way to the ultimate reality. Celibacy for the kingdom is saying, I want to enter that ultimate reality now. Only by looking towards this heavenly reality, therefore, can we properly understand the celibate vocation. As we read in the gospel, Christ calls some of his followers to embrace celibacy, not for celibacy's sake, but for the sake of the kingdom of heaven. It is celibacy for God's sake, therefore. Not celibacy for God's sake. It is celibacy for the sake of a greater union. In this way, we come to understand, contrary to all the widespread impressions that are out there, celibacy for the kingdom is not a negation of God's plan for sexuality. It is a living out, here and now, of the ultimate fulfillment of God's plan for sexuality, which is consummated in the marriage of the Lamb. In fact, John Paul II says, if we approach celibacy for the kingdom as some kind of negation of our sexuality, we are not living it according to the call of Christ. I clarify here. Both vocations, marriage and celibacy for the kingdom, each in their own way, are a fulfillment of the call to spousal love that God has chiseled right in our bodies, right? A man's body does not make sense by itself. A woman's body does not make sense by itself. Seen in light of each other, unless we're blind, we see the call to spousal love and communion. John Paul II calls that call the spousal meaning of the body. And he says this, quote, on the basis of the same spousal meaning of the body, there can be formed the love that commits someone to marriage for the whole of life, but there can also be formed the love that commits a person for his whole life to celibacy for the kingdom of heaven. We can't escape the call of our sexuality. Every man, by the virtue of the fact that he's a man, is called in one way or another to be a husband and a father. And every woman, by the virtue of the fact that she's a woman, is called in one way or another to be a wife and a mother. The priest marries the church, and he bears numerous spiritual children, so we properly call him father. The religious sister, the religious woman, marries Christ, and she bears numerous spiritual children. And so we properly call Mother Teresa, for example, Mother Teresa. Here we can see that the terms husband, father, brother, son, wife, mother, sister, daughter, they apply just as much to celibacy for the kingdom as they do to marriage and family life. Why? Because both vocations flow from the fundamental truth of our creation as male and female. Both vocations, therefore, answer that fundamental question. Why did God make us male and female? How are we to live out our sexuality? John Paul II says there are two ways of living out the vocation chiseled by God in our sexuality in a definitive and total way. Marriage or celibacy for the kingdom. Each, in their own way, are a fulfillment of the deepest truth that we are made in the image and likeness of God as male and female. Maybe some of you watching this video are still wondering, Lord, how am I to live out my sexuality, my identity as a man or as a woman? How am I to be a gift that images your love in this world? And maybe you are called to celibacy for the kingdom. If that is God's call on your life, be not afraid. This will be the path by which you fulfill the deepest truth of your sexuality, and this will be the path that launches you to the eternal destiny that we call the marriage of the Lamb. I have so much more to share with you about how our bodies reveal our ultimate destiny. I do so in the ongoing formation programs that we have for our patron community. I do so in the courses that I teach online and in person for the Theology of the Body Institute. I encourage you to check out the links below to learn more. Until next time, may our eyes continue to be opened to how our bodies reveal the mysteries of God.